This is the Dhaka Tribune. I am Asif Islam. I'm joined by Ejaj Ahmad, who has spent the last 14 years building his organization, the Bangladesh Youth Leadership Center. He has now just recently opened the Global Youth Leadership Center. A graduate of St. Andrews University and the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, Ejaj specializes in building youth leadership to take on social challenges. He's about to take off for Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt to attend COP27, a meeting that is meant to steer global efforts to take on the biggest problem of all, climate change. Ejaj, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Asif. Delighted to be here with you.
To begin, I have to ask you, what is the state of the planet and why are you so invested in climate change?
Thank you. It's a great question. The state of the planet, when we look at the latest science, for example, we just hosted a large global youth climate summit in Khulna, Bangladesh, where I had a fireside conversation with Sir David King, who's one of the world's leading climate scientists, chairman and founder of the Climate Crisis Advisory Group. And the data that he presented is quite alarming. And I think there is consensus among the scientific community that we are in a climate crisis. And what do I mean by that? If you recall in 2015, at the 2015 COP, the agreement by the countries were that we would limit our global warming to 1.5 degrees or below 2, preferably 1.5, above the pre-industrial levels, okay? In 2022, we are already at 1.35 degrees. So there is no way that we can achieve the goal that we set in 2015. So that's not going to happen. And now you're looking at, 2 degrees, 2.5 degrees, even up to 3 degrees by end of the century. And what does it mean for the planet? What it means is by end of the century, we are looking at a 6-meter increase in sea levels, and just a 1-meter increase in sea level for a country like Bangladesh is going to be devastating. So I am invested in this issue because I think this is going to be the biggest challenge facing humanity and have big consequences for a country like Bangladesh. And it's a global problem. So one has to, look at it from a global lens. So that is the current state of the planet. And Asif, if I just show a slide to you, we have data for the last 800,000 years, right? So we have the data for that. And out of that, if you look at the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it was averaging around 280, which is a stable level of CO2 in the atmosphere. Right now in 2022, it's above 420 parts per million. And humanity has never seen this level of CO2 in the atmosphere. And when I talk about 420, I'm just referring to one greenhouse gas. As we all know, there are other major greenhouse gases like methane. And if you take into consideration CO2, methane, and others, we have crossed 500 parts per million. So that is a huge challenge facing humanity right now. And we have to figure out very quickly, how do we return to normal levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, bring the CO2 level to 280 parts per million, at which level humanity has flourished long term.
Well, it seems as though the alarm bells have been ringing. I mean, and the science is pretty certain that this is happening. And yet people around the world have been slow to respond to climate change. Why is that?
So I think this is, it comes down to human nature. I think humans we all are short-sighted, and we do not like the idea of loss. And by loss, I mean the idea of making adjustments, making sacrifices in our own way of leading life. The issue is not so much about why humans have been resistant to changing, because I don't think people are resistant to change. If I, Asif, gave you $1 million today, that's a change in your life, but you would not resist that. You would welcome that. People resist change when there is loss attached to it. So people actually are resisting loss. And I think the reason why businesses, governments, citizens have not taken this crisis seriously because one is we thought the future generation will take care of this problem. This problem is not going to happen in my lifetime. And second is we sometimes feel powerless that what can one individual do? So citizens don't take action. And sometimes we feel overwhelmed that it's such a huge crisis. What intervention can I make to make contribution? So these are some of the reasons why I think progress has been quite slow.
Right. And you touch on the idea of climate justice just there. And there's, I think there are two parts to that, right? One is temporal. So there's passing the buck to the next generation. And then there's a spatial element, right? So some parts of the world produce more pollution, other parts of the world have to pay the price for it. For a country like Bangladesh, what should the priorities be?
It's a very relevant question. And Bangladesh, along with the other 54 countries of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, we are responsible for only 5% of global emissions, and yet stand to lose the most from a warming planet. So there is clearly this element of climate injustice that countries who contribute least to the problem suffer the most. So what should our strategy be moving forward? And rightly so, at COP27, the party delegation from Bangladesh, they're going to press for loss and damage, which is the right thing to do, because rich countries who have enjoyed tremendous economic growth fueled by fossil fuels since the 1750s, they have benefited the most and contributed most to the problem, and making us suffer due to this crisis. So loss and damage should be on the agenda. We should keep on advocating for it, while at the same time recognize the practicality of it. And if we don't get support, then how do we adapt to this changing reality? So how do we build our own resilience? As you know, Bangladesh has a youth unemployment of more than 10%. So large number of young people coming to the job market every year, around 2.3 million young people, 200,000 jobs. So we have to create self-employment opportunities. I think entrepreneurial education around climate mitigation, climate adaptation should be a priority. So how do we create more self-employment opportunities in this space? Large-scale education around climate science, so our young generation is educated about climate change, how our individual actions are contributing to a warming planet. So I think that should be a priority. And finally, I think because of this increasing water level, large parts of Bangladesh will be affected by flooding, particularly in the southern region. And we are already seeing this. About 2,000 people are migrating to Dhaka every day, and there's tremendous pressure on the capital city. So we need to figure out, as this, now that the pandemic has sort of, subsided, and once we are past this recession, how do we send large numbers of young people who are skilled overseas for employment? And migration is going to be a global phenomenon because of climate change. And how can Bangladesh be ahead of the curve? We are prepared for it. We train our young people with the right kind of skills that will be required in the global north. And we send large numbers of young people, which will also contribute to increased remittance for the country. So these are some of the priorities that I believe can be helpful for Bangladesh.
It sounds like a lot has to be done. You have recently launched the Global Youth Leadership Center. What role should the youth play in all of this?
Thank you. I think the youth have the biggest role to play in this, because it's their future that is at stake, right? And unfortunately, our generation, myself included, we have passed on this problem to the next generation, and now they have to figure this thing out. So young people, if I sort of divided into young people in global north and global south, what should their role be? So let me start with the global south young people. I think young people need to have a seat at the table, and I'm delighted to see that there is youth representation in the party delegation from Bangladesh this year for the first time at COP27. Their voices have to be heard. They need to do advocacy around loss and damage, which is something that global south young people are doing. At the same time, I think young people need to pursue entrepreneurial opportunities around climate mitigation and adaptation. New technologies, new business models. How do we create businesses that are sustainable, but also can generate employment and resources for people? So that's something that I think young people have a role to play in the global south. And in the global north also, we are seeing a lot of youth energy around climate change, which is a positive. I see that very positively. But how do you channel this energy in the right direction? If global north young people can push their governments for mitigation, for loss and damage, and also for restoration, for bringing down technologies, bringing down this excess CO2 that we have in the atmosphere. Why is a country like Bangladesh going to COP27 and asking America and the UK and other developed countries that, we should receive loss and damage? The other argument could be, you don't have to pay us anything, but just take down what you put up. You do your part of the work because you have created the mess. Just take care of that part, and then the planet would be fine, and then we can all continue, living in a stable and sustainable planet. So I see a major role for young people. It's not just one thing. There has to be advocacy. There has to be leadership. There has to be organizing. There has to be entrepreneurship. And also, before we all preach for changing the world, we must also ask ourselves, what change am I bringing in my own lifestyle? So there has to be large-scale education around climate science, which is something that GYLC is trying to do. That how are your individual actions contributing to a warming planet? And what actions can I take by a smaller family, by changing my diet, to reducing my carbon footprint? So each of us has a role to play in taking ownership of our own carbon footprint. The Global Youth Leadership Center is going to mobilize young people, especially from global south countries, to tackle the climate crisis. And we have a three-pronged strategy. First, we will educate young people about the science of climate change, because I think there has been a general lack of awareness of how our individual actions contribute to climate change. So we will educate young people about the science of climate change. We will give them leadership training so that they can take individual action and collective action. And third, we will also invest in businesses that contribute to mitigation and adaptation. And the third piece is important because we know that in the global south, if young people don't have livelihood, they don't care about climate change. It's a faraway problem. So young people need employment, they need livelihood. So we want to contribute to businesses that tackle mitigation and adaptation, educate large-scale education around climate science, and then providing leadership training so people can bring about change at the individual level, but also mobilize others for change at the systemic level, which is what the world needs today. Change at scale and at speed.
So it sounds like you're asking everybody to really just step up to the plate. It sounds like you're asking people to take a hard look at the way they live their own lives. What sort of leadership is required, really, to tackle this crisis?
So this is a very difficult problem, and the leadership that is required is courageous, is authentic. That you have to speak truth to the people, and this is difficult, speaking truth to the people, knowing that a country like Vietnam, 90% of it, according to Sir David King, is going to go underwater by 2050. Now, Vietnam is one of the largest rice-producing countries in the world. So there are many other rice-producing countries, India, Bangladesh included. So there's going to be a massive food shortage. And we know that methane is emitted from livestock and also from rice production. But it's a difficult message to give to the people that reduce your consumption of rice and livestock and meat consumption. So these are difficult choices that we'll have to make. And therefore, the leadership that is required has to be courageous. It will not always be popular, but this is something that needs to happen. So that's one area of leadership. The other area of leadership, Asif, which I personally feel very strongly about, is we have to focus on technologies that can bring down large amounts of greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. And why do I say that? Because there isn't the slightest evidence in human history that humans have been able to bring about such large-scale change in behavior at the speed that is required today to avert this crisis. So there has to be efforts at the individual level. We need to keep on pushing for behavior change at the individual level, but also focus on technologies that can bring down greenhouse gases and can help us transition to better energy systems and just to reducing our carbon footprint.
Thank you, Ejaj. I mean, as we look forward to COP 27, it's a lot of hope. There's a lot riding on how this COP turns out. We've been disappointed in the past, but the scientists and the activists and some governments have really been pushing hard to get this sort of global consensus and to get the sort of speed and momentum that we need to address this crisis, this global crisis. I want to thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with me this evening. I wish you the best of luck at COP27. We will be catching up to see how things turned out as the year progresses. Thank you very much, Ejaj Ahmad, the founder of the Bangladesh Youth Leadership Center and the Global Youth Leadership Center. Best of luck at COP27.